Hi friends and fellow flute players, my name is Jonny and today I want to share with you 5 tips to dramatically improve your flute playing. One of the very first one is all about phrasing. What I find a lot with new flute players is they tend to use all of their air reserve and play these really long drawn out phrases, leaving you gasping for breath in between the phrases. So long phrases, gasp for breath, and then more long phrases. So break it up a little bit, add some variety to your flute playing by adding short phrases in between. Think of it as kind of a call and response technique as well. I'll give you an example instead of just playing long phrases. So adding some of those short phrases in between those really long drawn out phrases. The second one, this is one of my favorites, is bending notes but adding a tongue just before you bend the notes. So bending the note is the removal of your finger from the hole. Very gradually, you can play with the rate of speed in which you want to remove. The slower you go, the more drawn out the bend will be and slow the progression will be. And the quicker that you do it, well, the quicker the bend will happen. But adding that slight tongue just before you bend the note really accentuates what you're doing with your flute playing. You're setting that note up for something really special to happen. I'll give you an example. This is playing without tonguing just before I bend the note. And here you'll hear that I'm going to add the tongue just before the bend. Adding that slight difference will make a dramatic difference in your flute playing. Which leads me to number 3. And this is modulating your volume, but also your vibrato. And I know several of you that are watching this, maybe you haven't discovered your vibrato yet, but you can still work with volume. It's all about breath control and modulation of your breath. So this is by fading in and fading out notes and just creating some of those hills and valleys with your flute playing. I'll give you an example. We'll be fading in and out a couple of phrases and then adding some space. That's the other thing too, is don't rush through stuff. Add some space in between your phrases. It's a much like public speaking. Here we go. those hills and valleys, as I like to say, in your flute playing gives it interest and creates a lot for the listener when they are absorbing the beautiful music that you're creating. This leads me to number 4 on my list. This is adding dynamics to your embellishments. And one of these that I really like to focus on in particular is the pop, as I call it. Those of you that are familiar with the pop, it is a quick movement, usually on the top hand. I like to teach with index fingers because they are quick, they're agile, they're strong. And so what this is a quick removal and replacement on the flute of one of these fingers. Again, I like to teach with the index finger. Some of you may be a little bit quicker with your middle finger here on the top part of the flute. This is what the pop sounds like. Just really quick with that finger. You can also use the middle finger, like I said. So that is a fingers only technique. I break techniques down into different categories: tonguing, fingering, and breath control. But we can add some breath to this, much like we do with the bark. And by doing that, we really showcase the level of intensity in which we're playing this particular embellishment. So adding a little burst of breath in there to the pop really creates some unique dynamics happening. This leads me to number 5 on my list. That is playing upper register notes, but it's not as simple as just playing upper register notes. Those of you that aren't familiar with the upper register notes, these are notes into the second register of the flute. My flute today is in the key of F sharp minor, so my fundamental note is F sharp, and my top note here, with all holes open except for this one, that is also F sharp. So I'm shooting for notes above this F sharp. So I'm going to be going for G and A. And that gets us more into that major scale, but also opens up some new notes for those of you that aren't playing those. There's a lot of different cross fingerings. The flute is completely chromatic, which is very exciting. It's a little bit limited in range, but adding these extra upper register notes gets us a little bit more, a few more notes to play with. So in doing that, we don't necessarily have to push harder and be louder to get these notes. This comes down to a simple practice of the shape of our mouth. So when we naturally play the Native American flute, we kind of find ourselves in more of an ah state. And if you just say ah, what happens? Well, the shape of the inside of my mouth is open and large. The tongue is resting at the bottom of my mouth. My cheeks are very thin, and they're able to be puffed up. If I go ah. In ooh state, what happens is the inside shape of my mouth now becomes very small, and so the velocity in which the air is traveling through my mouth is greater, it's faster. So my tongue has raised up a little bit in the bottom of my mouth. My cheeks have become thicker and are no longer able to puff up. And so what happens is the air has nowhere to go except out. And that's exactly what we need when we play upper register notes, because what happens if we don't apply this, sometimes what happens is we hit that upper register note, but what happens is we quickly find ourselves falling back from that ceiling. So we get a sound like this. And you got to push just a little bit, and that's being very lazy with that going for that upper register note. So now I want to be in ooh shape as I go for those upper register notes. It's much like, I'll give you a visualization. It's much like the end of a water hose. If you put your thumb over the end of a water hose as the water's flowing, what happens? That water then goes much faster because we've decreased the area in which it's coming out of. We haven't gone to the faucet to turn it up or turn it down anymore. And so that's what we do with the inside shape of our mouth. So to get those upper register notes, be more in that ooh state rather than ah. And notice as I come back down, my cheeks were kind of wavering a little bit. And so as I come back off of those upper register notes, I'm relaxing the inside of my mouth because I want it to be able to absorb some of the breath that isn't going through the flute, so I can help the flute out and give it the support that it needs. I hope that you found these tips helpful in your flute playing. If you'd like to work with me one-on-one via Skype or FaceTime or Facebook chat, let me know. Send me a message. Subscribe to my channel on YouTube, and send me a message via my website, JonnyLipfordMusic.com. You can find backing tracks, you can find sheet music, you can find more about tutorials on my website as well. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you'll join me next time.